A young girl whispered softly, "She attempted to harm me," she warned the affluent gentleman. He meticulously arranged a snare. Before we delve into this subject, please demonstrate your support for this video if you believe gentleness is a profound strength, not a weakness. Enjoy the unfolding narrative. Sometimes, the most vital admonitions originate from the most unassuming voices. Occasionally, those individuals we place our utmost confidence in are precisely the ones who harbor malevolent intentions. And sometimes, a child's innate foresight can safeguard not only their own existence but also the very soul of their parent. This is the chronicle of Alice Miller, a 6-year-old with vividly crimson hair and eyes that perceived far too much. Her father, Mr. Charles Hayes, was a highly successful chief executive officer who firmly believed he possessed complete control over every aspect of his life. He had meticulously built a flourishing educational software enterprise, provided an exquisite dwelling, and after enduring the profound loss of his beloved spouse 2 years prior, he was finally prepared to offer Alice the maternal figure he was convinced she required. Yet, Alice possessed knowledge her father lacked, a truth that would shatter every fundamental understanding Mr. Hayes held regarding affection, fidelity, and guardianship. Mr. Charles Hayes stood in his expansive kitchen that particular morning, with beams of daylight cascading through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a picturesque view of their meticulously maintained garden. At 39, he had cultivated the ability to navigate intricate multi-billion-dollar transactions with effortless ease, yet deciphering his daughter's mercurial moods remained an enigmatic puzzle that persistently vexed him day by day. The automated coffee machine emitted a soft gurgle as he observed Alice aimlessly pushing cereal around her breakfast bowl. Her usually vibrant demeanor was clouded by an emotion he could not quite articulate. "You are not consuming your meal, my dearest," Mr. Hayes observed, gently settling into the chair position directly across from her. The broad kitchen island separating them often felt like a vast expanse, particularly during moments such as these when Alice seemed to retreat into her own internal world. Alice's emerald eyes briefly met his gaze, then swiftly darted away. She had adopted this habit frequently of late, ever since Ms. Eleanor Black arrived 3 weeks ago. Mr. Hayes had attributed this behavior to adjustment anxiety, the natural apprehension any child might experience towards a prospective stepmother. After all, it had been exclusively the two of them for such an extended period. "Not hungry, Papa," her voice was more subdued than usual, barely audible. Mr. Hayes's chest constricted. He had been so intensely focused on constructing their future, on forging the ideal family unit he believed Alice deserved, that he had perhaps overlooked the subtle indications that she was not yet ready. Ms. Eleanor had been remarkably wonderful with Alice throughout their courtship, consistently patient and gentle, embodying everything Mr. Hayes had envisioned in a maternal figure. She possessed an advanced degree in early childhood education, thoroughly understood child development, and appeared to genuinely care for Alice's well-being. "Is this about the engagement celebration next weekend?" Mr. Hayes inquired, extending his hand across the table to lightly touch Alice's small hand. "I know it represents a significant alteration, having Eleanor here, but she cherishes you profoundly." "We both do." Alice's reaction was instantaneous and quite alarming. She abruptly yanked her hand away as if burned, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor as she pushed back from the table. The sudden, forceful movement caused her glass of orange juice to dangerously wobble, and Mr. Hayes swiftly lunged forward to intercept it before it shattered upon the floor. "Alice, what is amiss?" But she was already in motion, her small feet rapidly pattering up the grand staircase towards her private sleeping quarters. Mr. Hayes remained frozen, juice glass still in hand, attempting to comprehend the abrupt incident. In the ensuing silence, he discerned the distinct click of Ms. Eleanor's heels approaching from their master bedroom. "Is everything satisfactory downstairs?" Ms. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, perfectly composed in an elegant silk blouse and a fitted pencil skirt, her dark hair swept into a sophisticated bun. Even at 7:30 in the morning, she looked as though she had emerged directly from the pages of a fashion magazine. I detected sounds of rapid movement. Mr. Hayes carefully placed the juice glass down, his mind still attempting to process Alice's startling reaction. She has been rather withdrawn lately, not consuming her meals properly, not sleeping uninterruptedly through the night. Perhaps we are proceeding too quickly with the engagement. Ms. Eleanor's expression softened, and she moved to stand directly behind Mr. Hayes's chair, her hands gently settling upon his shoulders with practiced reassurance. Children process significant changes differently than adults, Charles. You are well aware of this. She is merely testing boundaries, observing if this new dynamic is stable. It is entirely normal. But the way she recoiled just now, Mr. Hayes leaned into Ms. Eleanor's comforting touch, seeking further reassurance. She has never behaved in such a manner previously. She is likely experiencing internal conflict, Ms. Eleanor explained, her voice adopting the professional tone she utilized when discussing child psychology. A part of her wishes to accept me, but another part feels as though she is betraying her mother's memory. It represents a classic response to parental remarriage. Mr. Hayes nodded slowly. It resonated logically. Ms. Eleanor always presented logical explanations. This was precisely what had initially captivated him about her, her remarkable ability to comprehend intricate emotional situations with such clarity and profound wisdom. When they had first encountered each other at an educational conference 8 months prior, she had impressed him not solely with her striking beauty but also with her insightful understanding of child development and learning psychology. Perhaps I should speak with her, Mr. Hayes stated, beginning to rise. Ms. Eleanor's hands tightened almost imperceptibly upon his shoulders. Grant her some personal space this morning. Allow her to process her emotions. Pressing for conversation when she is in such an emotional state will only heighten her resistance. Again, it sounded perfectly rational. Ms. Eleanor had meticulously studied these subjects, after all. Mr. Hayes, however, remained seated, though a persistent unease nagged at him, a faint internal voice that sounded suspiciously like his late wife Laura whispering that he ought to follow his innate instincts concerning their daughter. I have hired Leo to assist with Alice's afternoon activities, Mr. Hayes stated, subtly shifting the subject. He commences today. I believed having another young man present might help Alice acclimate to having masculine energy in the household once more. Ms. Eleanor's hands stilled for a fleeting moment before resuming their gentle massage upon his shoulders. A nanny? I believed we had discussed that I would be assuming greater responsibility for Alice's care. Leo is not precisely a nanny, more akin to a companion. He is 27, possesses experience with children, and will merely be here for a few hours after the school day, assisting with homework, escorting Alice to the park, that sort of thing. Mr. Hayes reached up to cover one of Ms. Eleanor's hands with his own. You will still be her primary maternal figure. This simply alleviates some pressure during the transitional period. Of course, Ms. Eleanor responded, but Mr. Hayes believed he detected a subtle sharpness in her tone. Whatever you deem most suitable. Upstairs, Alice's bedroom door remained resolutely closed. Mr. Hayes found himself gazing at the ceiling, pondering the thoughts swirling through his 6-year-old daughter's mind. He had meticulously built his entire professional career upon discerning individuals, upon comprehending latent motivations and concealed agendas in complex business dealings. So why did he feel so utterly bewildered when it pertained to the most vital person in his entire world? The manor settled around them, an expensive silence broken only by the distant, faint hum of urban traffic and the soft, rhythmic tick of the antique grandfather clock in the foyer. Ms. Eleanor's hands continued their calming motion upon his shoulders, yet Mr. Hayes could not dispel the unsettling sensation that something fundamental had irrevocably shifted in their impeccably structured morning routine. He was not yet aware, but his daughter was upstairs, pressed firmly against her bedroom door, keenly listening to every single word. And within her young mind, a terrifying understanding was beginning to coalesce, one that would soon compel Mr. Hayes to choose between the woman he believed he loved and the child who desperately needed him to believe in her more profoundly than he had ever believed in anything previously. Have you ever experienced the unsettling feeling that something was fundamentally amiss, yet could not quite pinpoint its exact nature? Sometimes our innate instincts whisper profound truths that our logical minds are not yet prepared to fully accept. Remain with me as we uncover what Alice is desperately attempting to communicate to her father. 3 days later, Mr. Hayes was meticulously reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when he discerned Alice's soft footsteps in the hallway. Unlike her usual cheerful skipping gait, these steps were hesitant, almost cautiously placed. He glanced up from his portable computer to discover her standing in his doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, firmly against her chest. "Papa." Her voice carried a distinct tremor that immediately commanded Mr. Hayes's undivided attention. "Come here, my dearest." He gently pushed his chair back from the polished mahogany desk and extended his arms. Alice approached slowly, her emerald eyes meticulously scanning the room as if confirming the absence of listeners before climbing onto his lap. "Where is Eleanor?" she whispered. "She went to the spa with her sibling. She won't return until dinner." "Why?" Alice's small body relaxed slightly against his chest, and Mr. Hayes felt his heart clench with the poignant realization that his daughter had patiently awaited Miss Eleanor's departure before approaching him. When had that troubling pattern commenced? "Papa, I need to convey something of great importance to you." Alice's voice remained barely above a whisper, yet there was an urgency within it that caused Mr. Hayes's stomach to tighten. "You can confide anything in me, Alice. You know that." She nodded, but her grip on Mr. Peanuts intensified. "Promise you won't become upset." "I promise." Alice took a shaky breath, the kind Mr. Hayes had observed her take before confessing to damaging something valuable or drawing on the walls. But this felt profoundly different, heavier. "Miss Eleanor attempted to push me into the swimming pool yesterday," she stated in a rush, the words tumbling out like water from a fractured dam. "When we were outside and you were engaged in your telephone call, she seized my arm very tightly and tried to propel me towards the deep end. But Leo appeared around the corner, and Miss Eleanor released me very swiftly and pretended she was merely playing with me." Mr. Hayes's entire world tilted slightly on its axis. He stared down at his daughter's earnest face, searching for any indicators of the elaborate imagination that occasionally colored her narratives. But there was no fantastical element present here, no talking animals or magical transformations, just a simple, terrifying accusation. "Alice, are you certain? Perhaps Eleanor was merely engaging in play, and it felt different than you anticipated." "No, Papa." Alice's voice grew stronger, more insistent. Her face was angry, truly angry, and she whispered something unkind about how I ought to learn to swim more proficiently. But when Leo appeared, her expression changed very rapidly, and she smiled and stated, "We were merely having fun." Mr. Hayes's mind raced. Miss Eleanor had mentioned yesterday that she had spent some time with Alice by the swimming pool while he was occupied with a conference call involving investors. She had appeared completely normal at dinner, chatting about wedding arrangements and inquiring about Alice's school day. There had been no mention of any incident, no suggestion that anything out of the ordinary had transpired. Did Leo witness what occurred? Alice nodded vigorously. He inquired if I was all right after Miss Eleanor went inside. He stated Miss Eleanor was grasping my arm too tightly and wished to ensure I was unharmed. Mr. Hayes felt something cold settle in his chest. Leo had been with them for only 3 days, yet he had already proven himself to be remarkably observant and genuinely caring towards Alice. He had no logical reason to fabricate or misinterpret a harmless interaction. "Show me your arm, my dearest." Alice pushed up the sleeve of her pink sweater, revealing her small forearm. Mr. Hayes's breath caught. There, upon her pale skin, were 5 distinct, finger-shaped bruises, already fading to a yellowish green, but unmistakably the indelible marks of a tight grip. "When did these occur?" "Yesterday, when she seized me." Leo applied ice to them and stated, "Perhaps I should not inform you because you might become needlessly worried, but they still caused discomfort, and I became frightened." Mr. Hayes gently traced the marks with his finger, his mind struggling to process the visual evidence. These were not the type of bruises resulting from rough play or accidental grabbing. They were too deliberate, too perfectly formed. Someone had gripped his daughter's arm with sufficient force to leave enduring marks. "Alice, I require you to listen to me with extreme care. You acted correctly by informing me of this. I am never going to be angry with you for disclosing when someone causes you harm, even if it is an individual I care deeply about. Do you comprehend?" Alice nodded, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "Are you going to question Ms. Eleanor about this?" Mr. Hayes hesitated. Every innate instinct screamed that he should confront Ms. Eleanor immediately, demand an explanation for the bruises upon his daughter's arm. But another part of him, the part that had succumbed to Ms. Eleanor's apparent warmth and sharp intellect, struggled to believe she could be capable of intentionally harming a child. "I am going to ascertain what transpired," he stated finally. "But I require you to promise me something. If anyone ever attempts to harm you again, anyone whatsoever, you must come directly to me. Do not delay. Do not worry about causing trouble for anyone. You must come to me instantly." "I promise, Papa." Mr. Hayes held his daughter close, inhaling the familiar scent of her strawberry-scented shampoo while his mind churned with terrible possibilities. How could he have overlooked this? How could he have been so singularly focused on constructing what he believed was a perfect family that he had utterly failed to safeguard its most precious component? "Papa." Alice's voice was muffled against his chest. "Yes, my dearest. I do not desire Ms. Eleanor to become my new maternal figure." The word struck Mr. Hayes like a physical blow. For months, he had reassured himself that Alice would gradually warm to Ms. Eleanor, that children simply required time to adjust to significant changes. He had been so confident in his decision, so certain that Ms. Eleanor's professional background and apparent affection for Alice rendered her the ideal partner. Why not, Alice? Besides what occurred yesterday. Alice pulled back to look at him, her young face serious in a manner that caused Mr. Hayes's heart to ache. "She is different when you are not observing her. Her voice becomes malicious, and her eyes acquire a frightening aspect, and she does not genuinely care for me, Papa. She pretends, but I can discern the truth." Mr. Hayes had meticulously built his professional career upon discerning individuals, upon seeing through facades and comprehending concealed motivations. But somehow, when it pertained to the woman he had planned to marry, he had been utterly blind. Or perhaps he had chosen to be blind, so desperate to provide Alice with a mother and himself with a partner that he had ignored warning signs that now seemed glaringly obvious. "What do you mean, her voice becomes malicious?" "Like yesterday, after Leo departed, Ms. Eleanor stated I was a sneaky little girl and that I had better not go weeping to Papa about every minor issue or she would furnish me with something substantial to truly weep about." Each word felt like a sharp knife twisting in Mr. Hayes's chest. His 6-year-old daughter was vividly describing emotional abuse, and he had been completely oblivious to its occurrence within his own dwelling. "Alice, I am profoundly sorry I did not perceive this sooner. I should have been paying closer attention." "It is acceptable, Papa. You were preoccupied with professional matters." But it was not acceptable, Mr. Hayes realized. He had been failing in his most vital responsibility, protecting his daughter. He had been so intensely focused on providing for her financially and establishing what he believed was a stable family structure that he had overlooked the clear indications that she was being threatened within her own home. "We are going to rectify this," he stated, surprising himself with the resolute certainty in his voice. "I promise you, we are going to rectify this." As Mr. Hayes held his daughter close, his mind was already actively planning his next courses of action. He needed to converse with Leo. He needed to meticulously document the bruises. He needed to ascertain who Ms. Eleanor truly was beneath the polished exterior she presented to him. But most crucially, he needed to commence listening to his daughter with the identical level of meticulous attention he dedicated to multi-million-dollar business transactions. Because Alice was worth more than all of them combined, and she had been attempting to communicate something that could safeguard both their lives. If you are a parent or grandparent, you comprehend the profound preciousness of those small voices. Sometimes, children perceive truths that we adults completely overlook. Do not forget to indicate your appreciation for this video and subscribe for additional narratives that remind us why listening to our children might be the single most crucial endeavor we ever undertake. The subsequent morning, Mr. Hayes found himself observing Ms. Eleanor with newly awakened perception as she progressed through their morning routine. She appeared perfectly normal, humming softly as she prepared her customary green smoothie, inquiring about his schedule for the day, discussing the arrangements for their engagement celebration. But now, every gesture, every word, was filtered through the critical lens of Alice's accusation. "Good morning, my dear," Ms. Eleanor stated as Alice appeared in the kitchen doorway, already attired for school in jeans and a purple t-shirt. Her voice was warm, exactly the tone Mr. Hayes had always appreciated about her interactions with his daughter. Alice mumbled a greeting and slid into her chair at the breakfast table, keeping her eyes fixed resolutely on her plate. Mr. Hayes noticed how she strategically positioned herself as far from Ms. Eleanor as possible while still remaining at the table. "I prepared your favorite pancakes," Ms. Eleanor announced, setting a plate in front of Alice with a flourish. "Blueberry, with just a touch of whipped cream, precisely how you enjoy them." "Thank you," Alice whispered, but she did not touch the eating utensil. Mr. Hayes observed this interaction with escalating unease. Ms. Eleanor appeared genuinely caring, but Alice's body language unequivocally screamed discomfort. His daughter sat rigidly in her chair, shoulders hunched forward as if instinctively protecting herself from an invisible threat. "Are you not hungry, my dear?" Ms. Eleanor inquired, settling into her own chair with her smoothie. "You barely consumed your dinner last night either." "I am fine," Alice replied, finally picking up her fork, but merely pushing the pancakes around her plate. Mr. Hayes was on the verge of intervening when the doorbell chimed. "That will be Leo," he stated, grateful for the timely interruption. "He is going to escort you to school today, Alice." The alteration in his daughter was immediate and dramatic. Her shoulders relaxed, her face brightened perceptibly, and she actually took a bite of pancake. "Really? Really? I believed it might be pleasant for you to have some companionship on your walk." Mr. Hayes proceeded to answer the door, discovering Leo on the front step with a warm smile and a colorful backpack slung casually over his shoulder. At 27, he possessed an easy, natural rapport with children that reminded Mr. Hayes of his late wife Laura. His brown hair was neatly pulled back in a practical ponytail, and his jeans and sneakers suggested someone more interested in practicality than high fashion. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Ready for our adventure, Alice?" Alice practically bounced out of her chair, abandoning her barely touched breakfast to seize her school backpack. The stark contrast between her demeanor now and just moments ago was truly striking. "Hold on, my dear," Mr. Hayes stated. "Finish your breakfast first." "But Papa, we will be late for school." "We have ample time," Leo assured her, checking his timepiece. "Perhaps I could enjoy a quick cup of coffee while you eat." Mr. Hayes led Leo into the kitchen, where Ms. Eleanor was still seated at the table, observing the interaction with what appeared to be polite interest. But Mr. Hayes believed he detected something else in her expression, something that flickered across her features too quickly to precisely identify. "Eleanor, this is Leo, Alice's new companion." "Leo, this is my fiancé, Ms. Eleanor." "It is so pleasant to finally meet you," Leo stated, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "Alice has conveyed wonderful things about you." Ms. Eleanor's smile seemed to freeze for a fleeting moment before she accepted the handshake. "Has she? How utterly charming. Mr. Hayes mentioned you would be assisting with Alice's after-school activities and the occasional school walk." Leo agreed, accepting the cup of coffee Mr. Hayes offered him. "I trust you do not object to the intrusion into your morning routine." "Not at all, though I do experience some apprehension regarding Alice developing excessive attachment to temporary arrangements." Mr. Hayes frowned at the comment. He had not mentioned anything about Leo's position being temporary, because it was not. In fact, he had been considering expanding Leo's hours based on the remarkable connection he and Alice had forged. "Oh, I do not believe there is anything temporary about it," Leo replied easily, but Mr. Hayes caught the subtle tension in his voice. Mr. Hayes and I discussed this being a long-term arrangement. An uncomfortable silence settled over the kitchen. Alice, who had been nibbling at her pancakes, suddenly pushed her plate away. "I am finished. May we depart now?" "You have barely consumed anything," Miss Eleanor observed, and this time Mr. Hayes was certain he heard a distinct edge to her voice. "Growing girls require proper nourishment." "I am not hungry," Alice stated, sliding off her chair. "Alice." Miss Eleanor's voice sharpened slightly. "Sit back down and finish your breakfast." The command was delivered with such unyielding authority that even Mr. Hayes felt compelled to respond, but Alice's reaction was immediate and highly revealing. She shrank back against Leo's legs, her small body trembling. "It is all right," Leo stated quickly, his hand settling protectively on Alice's shoulder. "Sometimes young ones are not hungry in the morning. There is no harm in wrapping up the pancakes for an after-school snack." "I hardly believe you are qualified to render decisions regarding Alice's nutritional requirements," Ms. Eleanor snapped, then immediately appeared to catch herself. "I apologize, that came out incorrectly. I merely worry about her eating habits." But the damage was done. Mr. Hayes had witnessed it, the chilling flash of something cold and controlling in Ms. Eleanor's expression, the way Alice had instinctively sought protection from Leo. Most revealing of all was Leo's reaction, protective, alert, as if he had witnessed something similar previously. "Why do you and Leo proceed to school?" Mr. Hayes suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "I will see you this afternoon, my dearest." Alice hugged him goodbye, her small arms clinging for a moment longer than usual. "Love you, Papa." "Love you too, Alice. Have a pleasant day." As Mr. Hayes watched through the window, he noticed how Alice practically skipped once they were outside, chattering animatedly to Leo as they headed down the sidewalk. It was like watching a flower bloom in sunlight after being kept in profound shadows. "She seems very attached to the young man," Ms. Eleanor observed, her tone carefully casual. "Leo is good with her. Alice requires that right now. I worry that she is utilizing Leo to avoid bonding with me. Children sometimes manipulate caregivers against each other." Mr. Hayes turned from the window to study Ms. Eleanor's face. "Is that what you believe is transpiring?" "I believe Alice is struggling with change, and having another man in the house giving her attention might be enabling her resistance to accepting me as a maternal figure." The words made sense on the surface, but something about Ms. Eleanor's delivery bothered Mr. Hayes. There was a clinical quality to her assessment, as if she were discussing a case study rather than his own daughter's emotional well-being. "Perhaps we should speak with Leo about what he has observed," Mr. Hayes suggested. "Get his perspective on how Alice is adjusting." Ms. Eleanor's coffee cup clinked against the saucer as she set it down, a sharp sound in the quiet kitchen. "I am not certain that is appropriate. We should not place an employee in the position of evaluating family dynamics." "He is not evaluating. I am asking for his observations. Charles, I possess an advanced degree in education and child development. I believe I am better qualified to assess Alice's emotional state than someone we have known for 3 days." There it was again, that edge of authority, the suggestion that questioning Ms. Eleanor's judgment was somehow inappropriate. Mr. Hayes felt a familiar sensation, the same one he experienced during business negotiations when someone was attempting to manipulate him through appeals to expertise or authority. That afternoon, when Leo brought Alice home from school, Mr. Hayes asked if they could converse privately while Alice played in the garden. "Leo, I need to inquire about yesterday when you appeared around the corner and discovered Ms. Eleanor and Alice by the swimming pool." Leo's expression grew serious immediately. "Has Alice conveyed something?" "She informed me Ms. Eleanor grasped her arm with sufficient force to leave bruises." "She stated you witnessed it." Leo was quiet for an extended moment, his eyes moving to the window where they could observe Alice chasing butterflies among the roses. "Mr. Hayes, I do not wish to create difficulties in your relationship. The only difficulty would arise if my daughter is being harmed and I fail to take any action." Inform me what you observed. When I appeared around the corner, Miss Eleanor had Alice's arm in what appeared to be a very tight grip. Alice was attempting to pull away, and Miss Eleanor her expression was angry, truly angry. The moment she perceived me, her entire demeanor shifted. She smiled and stated they were merely playing, but Alice looked terrified. Mr. Hayes felt sick. Did you observe her attempt to push Alice towards the swimming pool? Not precisely push, but she was definitely pulling Alice in that direction, towards the deep end. And when I inquired if Alice was all right after Miss Eleanor went inside, she stated her arm hurt and that Miss Eleanor had said something about her needing to learn to swim more proficiently. What did you advise Alice? I applied ice to her arm and instructed her that she should speak with you if anyone ever made her feel unsafe. I did not wish to overstep, but Leo hesitated. But what? Mr. Hayes, I have worked with numerous families. I have observed how normal adult-child interactions appear, even when discipline is involved. What I witnessed yesterday was not normal. It was aggressive. And the manner in which Miss Eleanor's entire personality shifted when she realized she was being observed, that is concerning behavior. Mr. Hayes nodded slowly, pieces of a terrible puzzle beginning to fit together in his mind. Has Alice conveyed anything else to you about Miss Eleanor? She has mentioned that Miss Eleanor is different when you are not present. She seems genuinely afraid of being alone with her. That is why she always inquires where Miss Eleanor is before coming to find you. The weight of his failure as a father settled on Mr. Hayes's shoulders like a lead blanket. How many times had Alice attempted to communicate that something was amiss? How many signs had he overlooked while focusing on his own desire for companionship and his assumptions about what his daughter required? Mr. Hayes, may I ask you something? Of course. How well do you truly know Miss Eleanor? I mean, beyond what she has told you about herself. It was a simple question, but it struck Mr. Hayes like a physical blow. How well did he know her? They had met 8 months ago, had dated for 6 months before he proposed. He knew she possessed an advanced degree in education, knew she had been married briefly in her 20s, knew she claimed to love children and desired to be a mother. But when he truly reflected upon it, how much of that knowledge originated from his own investigation versus what Miss Eleanor had simply told him? I am going to investigate some matters, Mr. Hayes stated finally. In the interim, I do not wish Alice to be left alone with Miss Eleanor. Can you increase your hours, be here whenever I am not? Absolutely, whatever Alice requires. Trust is such a fragile entity, is it not? Especially when it pertains to the individuals we permit into our children's lives. Sometimes, the most perilous individuals are precisely those who know how to appear utterly trustworthy. That night, after Miss Eleanor had fallen asleep beside him, Mr. Hayes lay awake staring at the ceiling. The woman breathing softly next to him, the woman he had planned to marry in 2 weeks, suddenly felt like a complete stranger. At 3 in the morning, he slipped quietly out of bed and made his way to his home office. Mr. Hayes's first stop was the security system. His house was equipped with comprehensive surveillance cameras in every common area, motion sensors, and digital recording that stored footage for 30 days. If something had transpired by the swimming pool, there should be evidence. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, navigating to the previous day's footage. The cameras were motion-activated and time-stamped, making it easy to locate the relevant period when he had been engaged in his conference call. There, 2:47 post-meridian, camera 3, which covered the pool area. Mr. Hayes's blood ran cold as he observed the scene unfold. Miss Eleanor and Alice appeared in frame, Miss Eleanor's hand gripping Alice's upper arm exactly as his daughter had described. Even through the grainy security footage, Mr. Hayes could perceive the tightness of Miss Eleanor's grip, the way Alice was attempting to pull away. Then Miss Eleanor began moving towards the pool's deep end, not gently guiding but forcefully pulling. Alice's body language unequivocally screamed fear, her free arm flailing for balance, her small leg stumbling to keep pace with Miss Eleanor's determined stride. Mr. Hayes watched his fiancée lean down and utter something to his daughter that caused Alice's face to crumple in terror. Ms. Eleanor's expression, even captured in black and white pixels, was cold and threatening in a manner that caused Mr. Hayes's stomach to churn. Then Leo appeared, jogging around the corner from the garden path. The transformation in Ms. Eleanor was instantaneous and chilling. Her grip on Alice released immediately, her posture softened, and by the time Leo reached them, Ms. Eleanor was wearing the warm smile Mr. Hayes thought he knew so well. But he had seen what occurred before that smile. He had seen the real Ms. Eleanor, the one Alice had been attempting to warn him about. Mr. Hayes played the footage 3 more times, each viewing making him more certain that his 6-year-old daughter had been conveying the absolute truth. Ms. Eleanor had deliberately harmed Alice and had been moving her towards the deep end of the pool with clear malicious intent. His hands shook as he copied the footage to a secure drive. Then he commenced the much more difficult task of checking other camera feeds from the past 3 weeks, searching for incidents he might have overlooked. What he discovered made him sick. Camera after camera showed a pattern of behavior that Mr. Hayes had been completely blind to. Ms. Eleanor alone with Alice in the kitchen, her face twisted in anger as she gripped Alice's shoulders and spoke directly into her face. Ms. Eleanor in the living room, roughly jerking Alice's arm when she believed no one was observing. Ms. Eleanor in the hallway, backing Alice against the wall with body language that was clearly intimidating. The worst was footage from just 5 days ago. Mr. Hayes had been working late, and Ms. Eleanor was supposed to be assisting Alice with homework. Instead, the dining room camera showed Ms. Eleanor grabbing Alice's math workbook and throwing it across the room, then forcing Alice to crawl on the floor to retrieve the scattered papers while she stood over her, clearly berating the child. Through it all, Alice never resisted, never raised her voice. She simply endured, the way children do when they are being systematically terrorized by an adult they have no power to escape. Mr. Hayes's successful businessman facade cracked completely as he observed his daughter being abused in his own home while he remained obliviously focused on work and wedding plans. The guilt was overwhelming, but it was nothing compared to the rage building in his chest. But Mr. Hayes forced himself to think strategically. Emotion would not help Alice now. He needed evidence, documentation, and a plan. His next call was to Mr. Marcus, a police investigator who had helped him navigate a complex copyright lawsuit 2 years earlier. Marcus had become a friend during that difficult time, and Mr. Hayes trusted him completely. "Marcus, I know it is early but I need your help with something serious." "Charles, it is 4 in the morning. What is occurring?" "I need a background check run on my fiancée, a deep one. I believe she has been abusing Alice." The line went quiet for an extended moment. "Heavens, Charles, are you certain?" "I possess video evidence, but I need to know who she truly is before I ascertain what to do next." "Send me everything you have on her, full name, social security number if you possess it, previous addresses, everything. I will run it through the system and see what comes up." Mr. Hayes gathered every piece of documentation he had on Ms. Eleanor Black, social security number from their joint insurance application, previous addresses from her rental history, her driver's license number, even her college transcripts which she had shown him when they first discussed her educational background. Mr. Hayes spent the remainder of the early morning hours going through financial records, searching for any unusual expenditures or activities. What he found added another layer of concern to an already devastating situation. Ms. Eleanor had been utilizing their joint credit card for purchases she had never mentioned, medical consultations with child psychiatrists, bills for services supposedly related to evaluating a difficult child's behavioral problems. When Mr. Hayes called the offices, he discovered that Ms. Eleanor had been describing Alice as having severe emotional and behavioral issues, seeking medication recommendations for a child Mr. Hayes knew was perfectly healthy and well-adjusted. The picture becoming clear was far worse than simple abuse. Ms. Eleanor appeared to be systematically building a case to portray Alice as disturbed, possibly setting the stage for some kind of institutional placement that would remove Alice from Mr. Hayes's life entirely. When Marcus called that afternoon, the information he provided confirmed Mr. Hayes's worst fears and added new dimensions to the horror. Eleanor Black does not exist, Marcus stated without preamble. I mean, the social security number is real, but it belongs to a different person. The woman you know as Eleanor is actually Ms. Eleanor Black, and she has a record. Mr. Hayes's hands went numb. What kind of record? Restraining orders from 2 different states, child endangerment charges that were dropped when witnesses recanted their testimony. And Charles, she was investigated for the suspicious death of her stepson, Mr. Thomas, in Colorado 3 years ago. The world tilted sideways. Mr. Hayes gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. Death? A 7-year-old boy, officially ruled accidental drowning, but the investigating officers had serious doubts. The child supposedly fell into a swimming pool while Eleanor was the only adult present. Sound familiar? Mr. Hayes thought about the security footage, about Ms. Eleanor dragging Alice towards the deep end of their pool while he was distracted by work. Oh goodness, there is more. Ms. Eleanor Black has a pattern. She targets single fathers with young children, insinuates herself into their lives, and then systematically abuses the children while presenting herself as the perfect stepmother to the father. In Colorado, she almost succeeded in having her stepson declared mentally unstable and institutionalized before he died. She has been taking Alice to psychiatrists, Mr. Hayes whispered. Trying to get her diagnosed with behavioral disorders. Classic pattern. Make the child appear unstable, isolate them from support systems, then either remove them entirely or worse. Mr. Hayes felt bile rise in his throat. Marcus, she is living in my house. She has access to Alice every day. Then we need to move fast. But Charles, you cannot just confront her. Women like Eleanor are dangerous when cornered. They escalate. What do you suggest? We set a trap. Get her to reveal herself in a way that provides ironclad evidence, and we do it before she realizes you are onto her. As Mr. Hayes hung up the phone, one thought echoed in his mind: his 6-year-old daughter had tried to save both their lives, and he had almost failed to listen. But Alice had given him a gift more precious than his business empire or his own happiness. She had given him the truth. Now it was time to use that truth to protect her, no matter what it cost him. The worst betrayals often originate from those we trust most. Sometimes, saving the people we love means facing truths we never wanted to believe. Stay with us as Mr. Hayes prepares to confront a monster hiding behind a perfect smile. 2 days later, Mr. Hayes had everything in place. Marcus had helped him install additional hidden cameras throughout the house, positioned to capture audio as well as video. Leo had been briefed and was prepared to document any incidents. Most importantly, Mr. Hayes had created the perfect opportunity to give Ms. Eleanor enough rope to hang herself. He had told her he had to fly to Seattle for an emergency board meeting, a last-minute crisis that required his immediate attention. The trip was fabricated, of course. Instead, Mr. Hayes would be monitoring the house from his office downtown, watching through the hidden camera feeds as Ms. Eleanor revealed her true nature without his moderating presence. I hate leaving you to handle everything with the engagement party so close, Mr. Hayes stated that morning, playing his part perfectly as he packed his overnight bag. Are you certain you will be alright managing Alice's routine alone? Of course, darling, Ms. Eleanor replied, but Mr. Hayes caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. Alice and I will have some quality bonding time. It will be good for us. Mr. Hayes's stomach clenched at the words. Every instinct screamed against leaving Alice, even with Leo scheduled to arrive by noon. But this was the only way to get the evidence they needed to put Ms. Eleanor away permanently. Leo will be here to help, Mr. Hayes reminded her, watching Ms. Eleanor's reaction carefully. Actually, I was thinking we might not need Leo today. Alice and I should spend some time together without outside interference. There it was, the first red flag. Ms. Eleanor was already trying to isolate Alice from her protection. I believe it is important to maintain Alice's routine, Mr. Hayes stated firmly. Leo will be here at noon as scheduled. Ms. Eleanor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, whatever you think is best. From his downtown office, Mr. Hayes watched the camera feeds with growing anxiety. For the first hour after his departure, Ms. Eleanor maintained her normal facade. She helped Alice with her coloring book, prepared a snack, even played a board game in the living room. But at 11:30, with Leo's arrival imminent, everything changed. Mr. Hayes watched in horror as Ms. Eleanor's entire demeanor shifted. Her voice, which the hidden microphones captured clearly, became cold and threatening. "Listen to me very carefully, you little brat." Ms. Eleanor hissed, gripping Alice's shoulders with enough force to make the child wince. "Your precious Leo is not going to save you today. I am going to tell him you are sick and send him home, and then you and I are going to have a real conversation about your behavior." "You are hurting me," Alice whimpered, but Ms. Eleanor only tightened her grip. "This is nothing compared to what happens to little girls who do not listen. Do you want to know what happened to Mr. Thomas in Colorado, the little boy who would not stop telling lies about me?" Mr. Hayes felt ice water flood his veins. Ms. Eleanor was threatening his daughter with the death of her previous victim. "I want my papa," Alice sobbed. "Papa is not here, and when he comes back, you are going to tell him what a wonderful time we had together, because if you do not," Ms. Eleanor leaned close to Alice's ear, her voice dropping to a whisper that the sensitive microphones barely caught. "I know how to make little girls disappear, and nobody will ever believe you over me." Mr. Hayes was already moving, grabbing his keys and racing for the elevator. But the scene continued to unfold on his phone screen as he drove towards home with reckless speed. When Leo arrived, Ms. Eleanor met him at the door with an Oscar-worthy performance. "Oh Leo, I am so sorry but Alice is feeling quite ill today, fever and upset stomach. I believe it is best if she rests quietly instead of having company." Mr. Hayes could see Leo's confusion through the door camera. "Is she all right? Should I take her to the doctor?" No, just a little bug. I am perfectly capable of caring for her today. Why do you take the day off?" Leo hesitated, clearly torn between following Ms. Eleanor's instructions and his obvious concern for Alice. "Could I just peek in and say hello? I brought her a book she wanted. I really believe it is best if she is not disturbed. Children need rest when they are unwell." Mr. Hayes watched Leo reluctantly leave, his body language suggesting he was not entirely convinced by Ms. Eleanor's explanation. Good, at least someone else would notice that something was wrong. But now Alice was alone with a woman who had just threatened her with death. Mr. Hayes called Marcus while speeding through downtown traffic. "It is happening. She has isolated Alice and she is escalating. I am heading home now. I am 10 minutes behind you. Do not confront her alone, Charles. Wait for backup." But Mr. Hayes could not wait. On his phone screen, he watched Ms. Eleanor drag Alice upstairs, away from most of the cameras. The remaining audio picked up Alice's terrified cries and Ms. Eleanor's increasingly vicious threats. "Stupid little brat, you think you can turn your father against me? I have worked too hard to let a spoiled 6-year-old ruin everything." Mr. Hayes heard the sound of his daughter being shoved against a wall, heard her small voice begging Ms. Eleanor to stop. He pressed the accelerator harder, running red lights and taking corners at dangerous speeds. When he reached the house, Mr. Hayes forced himself to be strategic. Instead of bursting through the front door, he used his key quietly and made his way to the back staircase that would let him reach the second floor without being detected. The sounds coming from Alice's bedroom made his blood boil. Ms. Eleanor was systematically terrorizing his daughter, describing in graphic detail what happened to children who cause problems for their new mothers. Mr. Hayes positioned himself outside Alice's door, phone ready to record additional evidence. What he heard nearly broke his heart. "Please Miss Eleanor," Alice sobbed. "I am sorry I told Papa about the pool. I will not tell him anything else. I promise." "Too late for promises, you little liar. You have already ruined everything. But I am going to make sure you cannot cause any more problems. Mr. Hayes heard movement, heard Alice's sharp cry of pain, and could not wait any longer. He burst through the door to find Miss Eleanor with her hands around his daughter's throat, pressing her against the bedroom wall. "Get away from her," Mr. Hayes roared, his voice carrying all the fury of a father whose child was being murdered before his eyes. Miss Eleanor spun around, her face a mask of pure malice that Mr. Hayes had never seen before. This was not the woman who had shared his bed and planned their wedding. This was a predator caught in the act of destroying her prey. "Charles, you are supposed to be in Seattle," Miss Eleanor's voice cracked with panic, but her hands did not immediately release Alice. "Let go of my daughter now." For a moment, Miss Eleanor seemed to consider her options. Mr. Hayes could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. Then her expression shifted again, becoming the concerned stepmother Mr. Hayes thought he knew. "Charles, thank goodness you are here. Alice has been having some kind of episode. She was hurting herself and I was trying to calm her down. It was masterfully done." If Mr. Hayes had not seen the security footage, had not heard the threats, had not watched Ms. Eleanor's transformation from loving fiancé to child predator, he might have believed her. "Papa," Alice broke free from Ms. Eleanor's loosened grip and ran to Mr. Hayes, her small body shaking with trauma. Mr. Hayes scooped up his daughter, feeling the tremors that ran through her small frame. Over Alice's head, he stared at Ms. Eleanor with absolute contempt. "I saw everything, Eleanor. The cameras, the audio, all of it." Ms. Eleanor's mask slipped completely. The warm loving woman disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you are dealing with, Charles. That child has been lying to you from the beginning. She is disturbed and she needs professional help. The only disturbed person in this house is you. You will regret this," Ms. Eleanor stated, her voice carrying a threat that made Mr. Hayes's skin crawl. "I know things about you, about your business. I can destroy everything you have built." "Try it," Mr. Hayes said quietly. "I would rather lose everything than let you hurt my daughter for one more second." Marcus arrived with backup officers just as Ms. Eleanor was gathering her things, still muttering threats and accusations as they read her rights and placed her in handcuffs. She maintained her innocence to the end. "You are making a terrible mistake," she told Mr. Hayes as they led her away. "That child is dangerous. She will destroy you just like she is destroying me." But Mr. Hayes was not listening anymore. All his attention was focused on Alice, on reassuring his traumatized daughter that she was safe, that the monster was gone, that Papa would never let anyone hurt her again. "I believe you, my dearest. I am sorry I did not listen sooner. You were trying to protect us both." "It is all right, Papa," Alice whispered back. "You saved me when it mattered most. Trust your children's instincts. Trust your own gut feelings. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is listen to the small voices that are trying to warn us about danger." 1 year after Ms. Eleanor's sentencing, Mr. Hayes stood in their kitchen watching Alice help Leo make cookies for a school bake sale. The scene was so normal, so peacefully domestic that it sometimes felt like the nightmare with Ms. Eleanor had happened to someone else entirely. But small changes reminded Mr. Hayes daily of what they had survived. Alice still checked to see who was home before entering any room. She still preferred having Leo nearby when Mr. Hayes worked late. And she still asked questions about new people with the careful instincts of someone who had learned that not every smiling adult could be trusted. "Papa, can we add extra chocolate chips?" Alice asked, flour dusting her nose as she stirred cookie dough with intense concentration. "It is your project, my dearest. You decide." Mr. Hayes had learned to give Alice more control over her choices, even small ones like cookie ingredients. Dr. Victoria Stone, Alice's therapist, had explained that children who had been victimized by controlling adults needed to rebuild their sense of agency gradually. The therapy sessions had been difficult but necessary. For months, Alice had nightmares about Miss Eleanor returning to finish what she had started. She developed anxiety about being alone in any room, fear of swimming pools, and a startled response to unexpected visitors that broke Mr. Hayes's heart. But children are remarkably resilient when they have proper support. With Leo's consistent presence and Dr. Stone's gentle guidance, Alice had slowly reclaimed her natural confidence and joy. That evening, Mr. Hayes and Alice had their weekly checking-in conversation while making dinner together. It had become one of Mr. Hayes's favorite traditions, a time when they could discuss anything important while their hands were busy with cooking tasks. "How was school this week, my dearest?" Mr. Hayes asked as Alice carefully measured ingredients for their homemade pizza dough. "Good. Ms. Olivia introduced us to the new student teacher, Ms. Julia. She is really nice." Mr. Hayes's protective instincts engaged automatically. "What makes you think she is nice?" Alice considered the question with the thoughtfulness she had developed over the past 2 years. She asked us what we wanted to learn about instead of just telling us what we had to do. And when Mr. Daniel had trouble with his math, she sat with him quietly instead of making him feel embarrassed. She pays attention to how we feel, not just whether we are following rules. Mr. Hayes smiled at his daughter's sophisticated analysis. "Those are good observations. How does she make you feel when you are around her?" "Safe. Like I can ask questions without getting in trouble. Like she actually cares about us as people." Those are exactly the right things to notice about adults, Alice. I am proud of how carefully you think about these things. "Papa," Alice's voice grew more serious as she kneaded the pizza dough. "Do you ever worry that I am too careful about people now?" Ms. Emily's mother said her grandmother thinks I am an old soul and that it is sad for a child to be so watchful. Mr. Hayes paused in his sauce preparation, choosing his words carefully. "Alice, you have learned things about people that most children do not have to learn until they are much older. That does make you different from other children your age. But different is not bad. It does not feel bad most of the time. It feels like I have special powers for understanding people. That is a perfect way to think about it. You do have special powers. You can see through people who are not genuine, and you can recognize adults who are truly safe and caring. Those are incredibly valuable abilities. Papa, I am glad Ms. Eleanor taught me how to recognize fake people, even though she was scary. Now I can tell the difference between adults who really care about children and adults who are just pretending." Mr. Hayes felt a complex surge of emotions. Pride in his daughter's resilience, sadness that she had needed to learn such lessons so young, and gratitude that she had found a way to transform trauma into wisdom. "That is a very grown-up way to think about what happened to us, Alice. You turned something bad into something that makes you stronger and smarter. Leo says that is what brave people do. They take bad experiences and use them to help other people. Leo is right. And you have already helped other people by being brave enough to tell the truth about Ms. Eleanor. Detective Marcus told me that your testimony helped protect other children from getting hurt." Alice's eyes widened. "Really? How?" "By speaking up, you helped grown-ups understand how people like Eleanor trick families. Now other parents know what warning signs to watch for, so maybe some other child will not have to be scared like I was." "Exactly. Your courage made the world a little bit safer for other children." Later that evening, as Mr. Hayes tucked Alice into bed, she made a request that surprised him. "Papa, next time you want to date someone, can we all spend time together first? Not like pretend family time, but just regular time where I can see how they act when they think nobody important is watching." Mr. Hayes's heart swelled with love for his perceptive daughter. "That is exactly what we will do, my dearest. In fact, I will not even consider dating anyone unless you think they are worth getting to know better. Promise?" "I promise. You and I are a team, and we make important decisions together." Alice snuggled deeper into her blankets, her stuffed elephant Mr. Peanuts tucked securely beside her. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, Alice." More than all the stars in the sky and all the fish in the ocean. And all the fish in the ocean. It was their traditional exchange, the same words Mr. Hayes had said to her every night since she was a toddler. But now those words carried additional weight. The promise of a father who had learned that love meant protection, attention, and above all, listening. They had survived betrayal, terror, and a systematic assault on their family by a predator who had understood exactly how to exploit their vulnerabilities. But they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected than ever before. Ms. Eleanor Black was gone forever, locked away where she could never hurt another child. But the lessons she had unwittingly taught them about trust, vigilance, and the importance of listening to children would protect them for the rest of their lives. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from avoiding danger but from facing it with courage and emerging stronger on the other side. Thank you for staying with Mr. Hayes and Alice's journey. If this story touched your heart, please indicate your appreciation for this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us why protecting our children is the most important job we will ever have. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply listen when the smallest voices try to tell us the truth. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that children's instincts matter and that love means believing in them, even when it is hard. Until next time, keep listening to the little voices in your life. They might just save you both.